All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to, on this very stormy night, to St. Louis County Library's virtual program, Noteworthy Nonfiction Reads. We're really glad that you were able to join us. And before we get started, we are going to, I'm just going to draw your attention to a few features of our Zoom environment in case this is your first Zoom virtual program with us. So as a reminder, tonight's program is in a webinar format. So that means that your camera and microphone are not active. We can't see or hear you. But we hope that you can see or hear us. If you can't, we suggest that you turn up the volume on your device or that you leave the webinar, move a little bit closer to your Wi-Fi router and rejoin us. You can ask us questions though by entering those into the chat box. That's a little chat bubble, looks like a little bubble, speech bubble with the word chat underneath it. And we will be answering the questions though at the end of the presentation in a Q&A session. So tonight's presenters are myself. I'm Sarah. I'm an adult services librarian here at St. Louis County Library. I specialize in readers advisory, which is like matchmaking books and readers. I'm joined by Harry, also from Adult Services Readers Advisory, TC from our Bookmobiles and Mobile Services Department, and Blake, who is our author events coordinator. So I'm really happy to have TC and Blake with us tonight. All of our picks tonight are available in either print or e-media. If you signed up for the program before like noon today, you may have gotten an email from me with a handout that has all of the books we're going to talk about, and you can click on the covers. It takes you to our catalog so you can request a copy. If you didn't get that handout, no big deal, because I am going to send a follow-up email when the recording of this presentation is available on YouTube, usually within a couple of days. So yeah, hopefully if you have any questions that follow up, you can you can ask them by responding to the follow-up email. But yeah, let's go ahead and get us started. I'm going to get us started, and my first pick is My Brother by Jamaica Kincaid. So Kincaid is the winner of this year's St. Louis Literary Award, which is given by St. Louis University to, quote, recognize a living writer with a substantial body of work that has enriched our literary heritage by deepening our insight into the human condition and by expanding the scope of our compassion, end quote. And Kincaid's work definitely meets that criteria, as she writes both stylistically complex fiction and nonfiction that is on the themes of colonialism, gender, race, class, and family dynamics in just very lyrical prose. I'll take a little bit more time at the end to talk about some of the programs that we're doing in celebration of the award. But in this book, Kincaid tells the story of her brother's tumultuous life and his death from AIDS at the age of 33 in 1996. This biography was written just 1 year after his death, and its confessional, almost stream of consciousness style conveys the strong and conflicted emotions that she still had about this relationship. From an early age, he caused a lot of problems for the family by doing drugs and committing crimes and being sexually promiscuous. And, in the book, even as she contrasts her own life path with his, she also writes about how their experience growing up in Antigua with its colonial history affected both of them. The book is also the story of how Kincaid felt returning to Antigua and her family at the end of her brother's life after a very long absence. So, anyone who has had a fraught relationship with their family, especially with a sibling, and or has moved away from home only to be drawn back there by unfortunate circumstances, will find this poetic, emotionally intense biography relatable. I hope you check out more of her work and attend or participate in one of the programs that we are hosting honoring her. Okay, so my next pick is Slow Birding, The Art and Science of Enjoying Birds in Your Own Backyard by Joan Strassman. And in this book, evolutionary biologist and WashU professor Joan Strassman was inspired by the slow food movement, which emphasizes savoring local food and actively participating in its cultivation and preparation. And she noted that many birdwatching books and activities focus on traveling to see the most, rare or exotic species instead of focusing on learning about and deeply experiencing the birds in your own neighborhood. So she wrote this book to sort of be be similar, to be like a slow birding experience. So she covers 16 different species, including common birds that you probably see so often that they may have just become a part of your background, like American robins, house sparrows, and northern cardinals. And she also explores 5 different habitats, like your home yard, city parks, including Forest Park, which she uses as an example. And in each of these chapters, she gives background information about bird biology and behavior that's filled with interesting trivia and insight into the research about each one. So for example, when you watch robins, you will see that they frequently like hop a few steps and then stop and cock their head. Are they, and then they peck to like pull out a worm. So are they, like listening for the worms? Are they feeling the vibrations? Well, Strassman describes the study that determined that they are indeed actually listening for the worms. Also, the worms are mostly for babies. They're only partially eating them and then feeding them back to their young. So after the introduction to each species or habitat, Strassman suggests various activities that you can do to learn about and appreciate the birds, such as watching the behavior of cardinal pairs at the feeder. I've noticed a very particular pattern in how they approach the feeder, so maybe you will too. And like seeing their shades of red vary, and why, like for time of year and availability of berries, etc. So if you want to start appreciating the birds all around you, definitely check out this book, as well as a pair of binoculars, which you can check out at the library, and try out one of the activities that she suggests. And I will put a link to the more information about checking out binoculars from the library in the chat a little bit later. Okay, so my next pick is Bosnia and St. Louis Between Two Worlds by Patrick McCarthy and Akif Kogo. This book is a history of the Bosnian community in St. Louis. So why and how they came here and how they've contributed to and become an integral part of our city. It's jointly written by McCarthy, who is the Dean of Libraries and a professor at St. Louis University, specializing in Bosnian immigration and history, and Kogo, who is the founder and historian and archivist of the nonprofit organization St. Louis Bosnians, Inc. The book briefly covers the history of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then it discusses the causes and effects of the war there in the 1990s, which led to an exodus of refugees, many of whom came to St. Louis. And this book explains why that is. It also tells the stories of both the successes and tragedies of ordinary Bosnian St. Louisans as they made their life here. There are a lot of names, and some readers may find that confusing at first, but there are many pictures in the book that to like anchor those names to. I'd also just encourage you to let their stories sort of percolate through your reading experience and contribute to the larger story that emerges. The introduction to the book explains why very well. It states, quote, "The recent global and systemic upsurge in xenophobia and bigotry directed at migrants and refugees is predictably contingent upon their dehumanization. The powers that be or want to be present them and think of them as a mass of nothings and nobodies. But each person, each family, each town each community has their own history, their own set of stories that define them and locate them in the world, their own networks of love and friendship, their own human actuality and potential. To reduce them to a shapeless mass, to deprive people with names, homes, and families of their stories is the beginning of a crime against humanity," end quote. So all of those names and pictures are a really important part of relating to our Bosnian neighbors and coworkers and friends and family on a personal level by understanding their specific history and our own. You can also definitely see echoes of themes that relate to the current world conflicts in the Israel-Hamas war and the Russia-Ukraine wars. So I highly recommend this book for anyone that likes collective biographies or has an interest in St. Louis history. Okay, so my next pick is Sleeping with the Ancestors: How I Followed the Footprints of Slavery by Joseph McGill Jr. McGill is the history and cultural coordinator for Magnolia Plantation and Gardens in South Carolina, and he's also the founder of the Slave Dwelling Project, which I'll talk more about in just a second. He's had a long career working at and leading historical cultural institutions, starting as a park ranger at Fort Sumter. And his interest in historical dwellings was really first inspired by a visit to Anne Frank's house in Amsterdam while he was a young man in the military. He's also a longtime Civil War reenactor. And his journey to starting the slave dwelling project started when he was approached by a producer from the History Channel. about participating in a Civil War documentary where they wanted to include the perspectives of a white Confederate reenactor and a Black Union reenactor, and McGill became the latter. And when they asked him about some activities that, could be included in the show, he proposed staying the night in a slave cabin on the Boone Hall plantation, which is an idea he had been curious about for a long time. So this ended up being like a really profound experience for him that launched him on this mission to explore and sleep in many places where enslaved people had lived. And the project was originally only supposed to last a year and was called the Slave Cabin Project, but it just grew and became a much larger, mission for him. And he changed the name to the Slave Dwelling Project in acknowledgement that enslaved people slept in many kinds of buildings, not just cabins on plantations, including in institutions like universities that are still in operation today. And this book is the culmination of the research and experiences that he gathered on this project. It's really enlightening, engaging read, covering an aspect of history not really found, anywhere else. And there are some pictures in the book, but you can also follow McGill on Instagram if you want to see many, many more pictures. And I'll put a link to his Instagram later in the chat. But if you enjoy participatory or living history works like Rinkerbuck's Oregon Trail, Ruth Goodman's How to Be a Victorian, or Cheney McKnight's YouTube channel, Not Your Mama's History, who's mentioned in this book, then you should definitely check out this one. Okay, my next pick is Helgoland, Making Sense of the Quantum Revolution by Carlo Rovelli. And this is a book about quantum physics. But don't get scared away if you didn't take physics in high school or college, because I didn't. Most people have heard of Schrodinger's cat. Some people even think that they understand what it means, and a few even do. But in this book, Rovelli, the renowned theoretical physicist with the heart of a poet, gives the clearest explanation I have ever heard. And then he goes on to actually make it relevant to our lived experience. In the first half of the book, he gives a history of quantum physics, which was discovered by Heisenberg on the island of Helgoland, hence the name of the book. A quantum is like the smallest amount of a phenomenon, like the smallest measurable amount of a phenomenon. So for example, a photon of light or an electron in an atom. And for a long time, physicists could see how the quantum behaved. It acts like a wave, but then it kind of becomes a point when you look at it, but they didn't really understand why. And Rovelli describes and then rejects some of the theories that have been posited over the years. And then he spends the second half of the book arguing for the one that he thinks works the best, which is the relational theory of quantum physics. And Rovelli can explain it much better and more lyrically than I, so read the book. But basically, at the quantum level, everything is uncertain, or in a superposition, as it's technically called, until you look at it. But when two quanta relate to each other while a third observes it, an entanglement is created that makes it so that these two quanta behave in the same way when as each other when they're measured, even when they're separated by time and space. And since practically every atom in the universe has related to at least one other, these entanglements are really what weave the fabric of our observable world. And it's why everything on a macro level seems so solid. And Rovelli then goes on to explain the scientific and philosophical implications of this in his lovely, lyrical, and engaging prose. Honestly, I think Rovelli should be as well known as the popular astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. So if you are the kind of person who's always loved science and marveling at the universe, but perhaps you didn't major in it, and you want to understand quantum physics and why it matters, then definitely check out this book. Okay, and then my last pick is Forthcoming. We're all going to talk about one book that is not out yet, but that we're excited about. And this one is mine. It is Says Who, a kinder, funner usage guide for everyone who cares about words by Anne Curzon, and it's coming out March 26th. So I spent way too many years in academia following various style guides. So you might want to ask, me, why would I be excited about one more? And that's a fair question. It's because this guide is different from most of them. I believe that language evolves over time, and that the only reason that grammar is really important is so that we can express what we think and feel in a way that others can understand in order to create connections with each other and keep, society and art and science moving forward. And that's what Dr. Curzon thinks too. She is a linguist and the Dean of Language, Science, and the Arts at the University of Michigan. Her TEDx talk, What Makes a Word Real, in which she talks about how dictionary editors decide to include new words or new usages of old words in the dictionary, has been viewed over 2 million times. She also has a weekly show on Michigan Public Radio and a series of videos on the U of M YouTube page. And I'll put a link to her TEDx talk in the chat in just a little bit. But she is funny and relatable, and her love of language shines through. So now she's shared all of that wisdom and more in this guide that helps us move beyond what is right and wrong to what helps us understand each other. And this book has gotten starred reviews from Library Journal, Kirkus, and Publishers Weekly, who says it's, quote, chock full of fascinating trivia and persuasively argued this will give grammar sticklers pause, end quote. And who doesn't want to stick it to the sticklers? So this book is already on order in our catalog, and I hope you hop on the whole list. So that is it for me. I am going to turn it over to Harry.
Thanks, Sarah. So Sarah and I do the personalized reading lists, and we have this many fiction requests and this many nonfiction requests. And I think it's because people don't realize how fun nonfiction can be. And that's my first title, Opposable Thumbs, about Siskel and Ebert. How did they get together? Siskel, film critic for the Chicago Tribune, and Ebert for the Chicago Sun-Times. They were thrown together on a public TV show in Chicago. And they had chemistry, the kind of chemistry you get when you mix two chemicals that should never be mixed together. You had an explosion. They could not agree on anything. They couldn't agree on what to eat. They fought over who had more lines on a Saturday Night Live skit. They fought over who would sit closer to the host on a TV talk show. They fought all the time. If you ever watched the show, you saw that they often disagreed on the films that they liked. However, they ended up finally becoming friends at the end, and the author wrote this feel-good book after interviewing their widows, as well as people who were involved in the production of Siskel and Ebert at the movies. And in fact, there's a reason why Siskel's name is first. Siskel was extremely competitive. Ebert, the author says, was the better writer, more steeped in film, but Siskel had to be first. It's a hysterically funny book, and if you ever watched them, whether in syndication or when they were on public TV, I think you will enjoy the book. My second book is Brave the Wild River, which is about two female botanists who went down the Colorado River in 1938 to study how ecology had changed the river and the plants of that era. They also were cataloging undiscovered plants. They faced aggressive reporters, inaccurate news reports, but they kept going. The book takes us into the boats, so you feel like you're with them in the boat, and we learn about the plants that they discovered, like desert mistletoe, Indian paintbrush, coyote willow. The book has a map, so you can follow their path along the Colorado River, as well as photographs. I really like this book, and I know that many people have requested, for example, Lessons in Chemistry, which is fiction and written by a woman who was an advertising copywriter. This book is the real thing about women who did breakthrough work in science and botany, so I would highly recommend it. My next book is The Sisterhood, which is about the struggles and triumphs of women in the CIA, how they persevered despite sexism and discrimination. It covers 70 years from the founding of the CIA after World War II to the killing of Osama bin Laden, and how women analysts at the CIA were instrumental in finding bin Laden. The first half of the book is about the history of women in the CIA up to the 1990s, and then the second half is about the hunt for bin Laden. The only criticism I've seen of this book, written by a former high-level woman in the CIA is that it doesn't cover all the roles that women had in the CIA, including some in communications and other types of analysis. But I don't think you could fault the author for that. She did over 100 interviews, reviewed declassified documents, and also personal statements that she was given by women who served in the CIA. It is just absolutely a terrific book, and it's being developed for a series for either TV or streaming. So you want to read it now before it becomes unobtainable because it'll have a huge hold list. My next book is What Really Happens in Las Vegas. You're probably thinking, oh, this is going to be bad. No, it's James Patterson. It's a feel-good, non-explicit book where the authors take us to the worker bees of Las Vegas. We get to interview the woman who came up with the first drive-through wedding chapel. We get to meet a yoga instructor who flies his class attendees to remote parts of the desert by helicopter for their sessions. We meet a nursing student who became extremely wealthy by being an exotic dancer. As I said, don't worry, it's not explicit. And we meet escorts, chauffeurs, private chefs. We learn about how hotels are designed in Las Vegas. And best of all, and this was so good that I went on YouTube, and I recommend you do too, even if you don't read the book, a self-taught magician called Shin Lim. Shin, like the shin of your leg, and Lim, L-I-M, self-taught, now has a standing residency in Las Vegas for his magic shows. Go on YouTube and you will see incredible magic, including him astounding Penn and Teller. My next book is Number Go Up, which is a really funny account of Sam Bankman-Fried, cryptocurrency, non-fungible tokens, blockchain, written by a reporter for Bloomberg. Everything is very clearly explained. You will laugh hard, but you'll also cry because Sam Bankman-Fried, who was, of course, convicted of fraud, comes off as not exactly an innocent guy. His parents don't come off very well either, and his idea of effective altruism doesn't come off, but you will learn a lot about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, about scams that are being run by Chinese gangsters using basically slave labor. It's just a terrific book. And even if you've read Michael Lewis's Going Infinite, this is the better book, in my opinion. My upcoming book is The Genius of Judy. So I have never read a book by Judy Blume. I know that and I will before this book comes out because I'm dying to know how a suburban New Jersey housewife and mother of two in the 1960s became the most banned author in America in the 1980s. Now, I know that some of my colleagues love Judy Blume, and I know my sister read her when my sister was in middle school, but I haven't, so I will. I'm curious to read, have things changed? And did Judy Blume make a difference? I'm going to pass it over to TC.
Thanks. My first book is Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. I first discovered Susan Cain's work through her most recent book, Bittersweet, How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. In that book, which I adored, Cain explores the cultural perceptions of the bittersweet persona and how it can actually be a powerful and beneficial trait, despite often being considered a liability by society. That book led me to her groundbreaking and heavily influential work, Quiet, which I'll talk about today. In this book, Cain explores the many benefits of introverts in both business and as well as creative fields. She also investigates the ways in which extroversion has increasingly become considered the cultural ideal. Cain demonstrates that ignoring the gifts of introverts is detrimental both to introverts themselves as well as to society in general, which really needs introverts and extroverts to thrive. She connects diligent and thorough research with anecdotal stories and interviews. One example I found fascinating is the tendency of introverts to find and stick with a hobby or activity, etc. Thus, they spend more time, especially time in solitude, working on said craft or hobby. This often leads to a greater level of competency and self-esteem just because they've spent just so many more hours working on their craft. The difficulty for introverts, of course, is finding that hobby that is the right fit. If you want to better understand the introverts in your life and or make sure their unique talents are benefiting your business or organization, I highly recommend this book. It's also a wonderful read for introverts who, like myself, might read it and feel seen. My second book is The Transcendent Brain, Spirituality in the Age of Science by Alan Lightman. Alan Lightman is a writer and physicist with extensive research experience and recognition in both scientific and the humanities fields. In fact, he was the first person at MIT to receive dual faculty appointments in both science and the humanities. In this book, Lightman explores spiritual experiences and their connection to brain activity and emerging processes like consciousness. What is important to me, at least, is that he writes from the perspective of someone who views these spiritual experiences as important and valuable. And I think it's that foundational assumption that transcendent and spiritual experiences are meaningful is what makes the book welcoming and important, both for people with a purely scientifically materialistic worldview, as well as a worldview steeped in some or a lot of religion and or spirituality. He begins the book by briefly reviewing the history of philosophies on the soul and mind-body duality, as well as the history of scientific materialism. He then explores consciousness as an emergent process from the material brain, followed by the emergence of spirituality or spiritual experiences from consciousness. I especially enjoyed the way he linked transcendence, spirituality, and art as byproducts of various evolutionary survival traits. He finishes the book by reflecting on the relationship between science and spirituality today. That sounds like a lot of material, but all of this is written in a way that is summed up very neatly. It's very accessible to the average reader. I am not a scientist, and it made a lot of sense to me. This book had me stopping constantly to reflect on my own spiritual and artistic experiences in ways that felt both intellectually and spiritually stimulating. My next book is called The Nature Fix: Why Nature Makes Us Happier, Healthier, and More Creative by Florence Williams. It's well known and well documented that spending time in nature is good for humans. Poets, scientists, and philosophers have extolled on the benefits of nature and or made great discoveries while immersed in the wilderness throughout history. Heck, and you can confirm this with my wife, when life really gets me down, I tend to escape to the woods for a good long hike. So nature is good for us, but why is it good for us? And this is the question that Florence Williams, author and contributing editor at Outside Magazine, seeks to answer. In her search, Williams travels to Japan, Korea, various parts of the United States, Canada, Finland, Scotland, and honestly, I might have forgotten a location or two. We learn about the research into the chemicals trees emit to protect themselves from bugs and fungus, which also just so happen to have a bunch of amazing and measurable health benefits to humans. We learn about the effect of noise pollution, bad, and birdsong, good, on the brain. We learn about how fractals naturally occurring in nature match the way the eyes track and record information. And that's a discovery inspired by linking fractal patterns found in Jackson Pollock paintings to those naturally occurring in nature, which I found really, really cool and fascinating. We also learn how nature immersion is used in a variety of ways to help people de-stress, combat illness, recover from trauma and PTSD, and even how it's beneficial to folks with ADHD. Also important to note is that Williams reviews a lot of data regarding just how much nature is most beneficial for humans, meaning how much total time spent in nature, as well as levels of immersion, like sitting next to an open window versus going to a city park versus going to a secluded forest, etc. I found all the details fascinating, but if you're hoping for a real quick distillation of the data, she gives you one at the end. I came up with a kind of ultra simple coda. Go outside often, sometimes in wild places, bring friends or not, breathe. Sounds like good advice. My next book is Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto by Tricia Hersey. Tricia Hersey is the founder and creator of the Nap Ministry, which is an organization that examines and advocates for the liberating powers of naps and rest. Her book, Rest is Resistance, is rooted in Black liberation, womanism, somatics, and Afrofuturism. It implores readers to shake off the expectations of grind culture, which is identified as a marriage of capitalism and white supremacy. This grind culture uses scare tactics, making us think, well, how am I going to pay the bills and have enough for this or that if I don't work this many jobs and do this much stuff? And it teaches us to see ourselves only as relentlessly productive machines, with our only purpose being productivity. It also teaches us, grind culture does, to feel guilt and shame when we need to stop and slow down and rest. Hersey implores us to rest not for the sake of being more productive later, but to rest for its own sake. Rest to give us space to dream, imagine, and play, to be human. When rest is done for its own sake, it connects us to our humanity, which is resistance from the forces of grind culture, which again seek to identify us not as humans, but as productive machines. Hersey calls us to recognize that we are enough as is right now. She writes with an intensity and directness that is also flowing and lyrical. Her strong, powerful tone blends gentleness with rage and determination. This book also contains ideas, hints, and tips for how to slow down and rest, even in small ways, and how to start to deprogram from the myths and stories of grind culture. Reading this book, I was forced to stop often and reflect. It continues to challenge me to think about my presuppositions about the world, about myself, racism, ableism, and the myths and stories that underlie society. My next book is Like Water, A Cultural History of Bruce Lee by Daryl Maeda. And I might have pronounced that incorrectly. I apologize. Bruce Lee is likely the most influential martial artist in the modern age, possessing a once-in-a-generation talent combined with incredible determination and a brilliant artistic mind. His legacy and influence on martial arts and the media, even the world, continues to this day. It's been said that he may be more famous now, over 50 years since his death, than he ever was in life. This book starts with a thorough look at the history of the Trans-Pacific colonialization and globalization, which are the forces that led to the environment in which Lee could make his mark. The book then details Lee's life, his childhood in Hong Kong, moving to the US, the influence of his family, meeting his eventual wife and starting a family, and of course, teaching martial arts in the United States before trying to tirelessly break into the TV and movie industry, despite Hollywood's prejudice against Asians. Throughout these stories, and in fact, really the foundation of these stories, is Lee's martial arts training, his philosophies, and his exploits, which are just incredible. There are a lot of fun and entertaining stories and quotes from Lee's students and friends and family, including a lot of really famous and iconic martial artists. He ran with a pretty impressive and cool crowd. As a martial artist myself, I just thought the book was absolutely wonderful and incredibly fascinating and thought-provoking. In fact, I found Lee's story and persona so interesting that I'm going to cheat. And upon finishing the book, I checked out another book called Be Water, My Friend, The Teachings of Bruce Lee by Shannon Lee, Bruce's daughter. Bruce Lee is often seen, and rightly so, as an icon of incredible strength and determination, but Shannon Lee shares with us the philosophical side to Lee and how he saw martial arts as more than just a physical discipline, but a way to live a good and full life. The tone in Shannon Lee's book is very gentle, a contrast perhaps to Lee's larger-than-life public persona, which is maybe a good reminder to all of us that everyone is far more complex than what we or the media perceive. And the upcoming book I'm really excited about is Wildlife: Finding My Purpose in an Untamed World by Dr. Rae Wynn Grant. Dr. Rae Wynn Grant is a renowned wildlife ecologist, author, TV presenter, and speaker. She's affiliated and/or has positions with UC Santa Barbara School of Environmental Science and Management, National Geographic Explorer, the American Museum of Natural History, Defenders of Wildlife, and Ethic, which is a sustainably focused investment firm. She also has a multi-award-winning podcast called Going Wild and can be found on NBC's Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, Protecting the Wild. Her website describes the book like this. Wildlife follows Ray from her urban childhood in California and Virginia to her adventures and explorations in some of the world's most rugged and remote locales. Hers is a story about a career in the wild spanning nearly 2 decades, carving a niche for herself as one of the very few Black female scientists, and the challenges she has had to overcome, expectations she's had to leave behind, and the many lessons she's learned along the way. Through her personal story of resilience and adaptation, Ray argues for a more connected, more socially and ecologically conscious world. An incredible journey spanning the Great Plains of North America to the rainforests of Madagascar, Wildlife sheds light on our pivotal relationship and responsibility to the natural world and the relatives, both human and otherwise, that we share it with. I'm excited to read this book because Dr. Wynne Grant sounds like a dynamic and fascinating person with a powerful and moving story about resilience and connection to the natural world. If you want more information about Dr. Wynne Grant, and the interesting work she's doing, I encourage you to check out her website, www.raywynnegrant.com. But honestly, if you just Google her name, it'll pop right up. So I'm going to pass it along now to Blake.
Thanks, TC. I have a wide variety of books tonight. Hopefully there is something for everyone. So my first pick tonight is Capote's Women. It's by Lawrence Lamar. And if you've watched the show Feud, Capote versus the Swans, this is the book that the show is based on. The author reveals the complex web of relationships and scandalous true stories behind Truman Capote's never published final novel, Answered Prayers. In that novel, Truman exposes the dark secrets, tragic glamour, which became his ultimate betrayal of his circle of high society friends he called the Swans. In the book, we learn about Truman's life, as we are also learning about these glamorous friends of his, and who those included Barbara Babe Pele, Gloria Guinness, Mariella Anginelli, Slim Hayward, Pamela Churchill, CZ Guest, and Lee Roswell. I'm sure many of you know at least one or two of those ladies on the list. I learned so much about these women and I had not known before, as well as things about Truman's later life that were fascinating. I love that Capote published parts of his book, Answered Prayers in Esquire, which detailed the fictional lives of his female confidants that were basically true stories. And Truman told a friend that it would be okay because the women were too stupid to know it was them. Boy, was he wrong. So check out this book if you want to know more about these fascinating women, one of the most notorious writers of all of his time, and the drama that engulfed them all. My next pick is Fever in the Heartland by Timothy Egan. It was one of my favorite books that I read last year. And SLCL, so St. Louis County Library, also hosted the author on his book tour, and he was fantastic. I highly recommend, in general, any of his books for any kind of history lover out there. I'm going to be honest, when I first saw this title, I was hesitant to pick up the book. A book about the KKK to me seems like a little touchy and a difficult read, but I'm glad I read it. It's a historical thriller that tells the story of the Klan's rise to power in the 1920s, the con man who drove the rise and the women who stopped them. Contrasting to the height of the Jazz Age and the Roaring '20s, there were also the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, and their sights were on the takeover of the Heartland, moving into the West. And a man named D.C. Stevenson set this takeover in motion. At the peak of his influence, a seemingly powerless woman, Madge Obenholzer, was one who would reveal his secret cruelties and whose deathbed testimony finally brought the Klan to their knees. While this book was a tough read, I recommend it to everyone. Egan writes like a fiction writer and keeps you turning the pages. The story in some ways reminded me of the Radium Girls. So if you liked that book, make sure you pick up this fascinating book as well. My next pick is The Random Acts of Medicine by Anupam B. Jena and Christopher Worsham. This is another great book by authors who were hosted here in the author event series last year. Both of these doctors are top in their field, and they wrote a book that anyone can read, not just medical professionals. And not only that, it's on a fascinating topic. And if you're like me and you get kind of hypochondriac, your hypochondriacness comes out when you read some of the medical books, don't be afraid of this one. I think you'll be okay. This book examines the hidden forces that sway doctors, impact patients, and shape our health. It is filled with information regarding healthcare and medicine, gleaned mostly from the author's research into social phenomena via natural experiments, which they define as naturally occurring events where there are variables that are effectively randomized on their own accord. An example of that they share in the book that I found fascinating was that the factors that when a kid is born and whether or not they'll get the flu shot and how that affects society in a larger view. So kids born in the spring or summer are less likely to get the flu shot because when they go in for their annual exam, which usually falls around their birthday, the flu shot is not available to them. And many of us know it's harder to get back to the doctor's office just to get that shot. Because of those types of factors, kids can then spread germs and not get then get other people sick. And it can have a larger impact from just that one simple thing of not getting vaccinated at that appointment. This book is filled with interesting information that you wouldn't realize affects your health or the world around you. I recommend this to anyone, obviously in the medical field, but also to anyone who's just curious about events or factors, no matter how small, that affect us daily. My next pick is The Most Beautiful Thing, the true story of the America's first all-Black high school rowing team by Ashe Cooper. It is one of my favorite books of all time. If I ever recommend a book the most, it's probably this one. It's a moving true story that Ashe Cooper writes about his experience as a member of America's first all-Black high school crew team at Chicago's Manly High School. This memoir recounts the time in high school for the boys in the book that they were growing up on the west side of Chicago in the 90s. Many of those kids, including Ashe, had parents who were in prison or drug addicts, and the gangs were a daily part of their lives. One day, a former University of Pennsylvania rowing crew team member and the founder of Urban Options, Ken, decided to recruit kids from Manly to start a rowing team. It was an incredible read to see these kids go from where they were to completely transforming their lives. Some of them didn't make it, and they go back to the world that they knew before the rowing team. Interestingly, one of the scariest aspects for many of the kids was to learn how to swim, and many had a fear of water. This is to say how much they had to overcome to be successful on this rowing team. Ken, Ashe's rowing mentor, included lessons in entrepreneurship in the rowing program, and 90% of the team became entrepreneurs. Ken believed the power of rowing and the power of the water can change your life and give you the opportunity to go to college, the opportunity to learn how to swim, the opportunity to travel and build a bond and build the brotherhood. It certainly did so for Ashe Cooper. It's a powerful book that I again love and recommend to everyone. Recently, the book was turned into a documentary narrated by Common, and I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but it's highly anticipated for me, and it's top on my list. And the last one on my list tonight is Tangled Vines by John Glatt. It's the power and privilege of the Murdaugh family murders. I, like many, am fascinated by true crime, I will admit. When I first heard about what happened to the Murdaugh family with the boat accident in 2019, I had to follow the case and learn more about the people involved. It's a rabbit hole once you start, so just fair warning. So I immediately devoured this book once it came out last year. The author, John Glatt, reconstructs the rise of the prestigious Murdaugh family and the shocking double murder that led to the downfall of its patriarch, Alec Murdaugh. The book does a great job of summing up a lot of information that is already out there on podcasts, documentaries, but also adds a lot of background and fills in holes that were left out of some accounts that are still around. We start with the history of the Murdaugh family and their entrenched power and influence over the decades, where various members played hard and fast with the law, but never paid, until now. It builds up to this current generation and their misdeeds, which is basically Alec Murdaugh embezzling funds clients he represented that ended up being millions of dollars, and was convicted of killing his wife and son. Now, I know I'm glossing over a lot of this, but read the book. It goes into everything in great detail, maybe too much detail. If you haven't been following this case and haven't watched the documentaries, or just prefer reading to watching, this is a great source for everything you need to know about the family. I think there will only be more coming out from this wild story that seems stranger than fiction. And my last pick tonight is a recent, or a read that will come out in May 21 of this year. So if anybody, I don't know if you were like me in the 90s, but I was enthralled by the Kennedys. But if you were like me, this book is for you. I was fascinated by John Kennedy Jr. and his wife, Carolyn Bessette Kennedy. And I bet at least one of you can remember where you were when you heard about their plane crash. Since then, I've always wanted to read more about this mysterious Carolyn Bessette. I'm going to read a little bit of the blurb from the back of the book because I think it does a really good job of what encompasses what you're going to get into when you get this book off the shelf. So Elizabeth Beller explores the real person behind the tabloid headlines and media frenzy. When she began dating American Prince, Carolyn was increasingly thrust into an overwhelmingly spotlight filled with relentless paparazzi who reacted to her reserve with a campaign of harassment and vilification. To this day, she is still depicted as a privileged princess. She's even been accused of being responsible for their untimely death, allegedly delaying taking off until she finished her pedicure, which I don't know if is true or not. But now she is revealed as never before. A fiercely independent woman devoted to her adopted city and career, Carolyn relied on her impeccable eye and drive to fly up the ranks at Calvin Klein in this glossy, high-stakes fashion world of the 1990s. When Carolyn met her future husband, John, he was immediately drawn to her strong-willed personality, effortless charm, and high intelligence. The relationship would change her life and catapult her to fame, but it was her vibrant life before their marriage and then hidden afterwards that is truly fascinating. Based on in-depth research and exclusive interviews with friends, family members, teachers, roommates, and colleagues, this comprehensive biography reveals a multifaceted woman worthy of our attention regardless of her husband and untimely death. I cannot wait to read this one, like I said, and it comes out on May 21st. So if you're interested, make sure you put your hold in now. And that's all from me. So I will go ahead and take it back to Sarah.
Thank you, Blake. All right. So, yeah, so before we get to the Q&A session, do know that the chat is open. So if you do have any questions for us, we'll have a little Q&A session in just a few minutes. So please go ahead and enter your questions into the chat. Before we get to that, I have a few business things to bring up with you. Harry mentioned that we have a personalized reading service. This is a form on our website that you can fill out, where you tell us what you like or what you don't like, and we will send you a list of 5 titles created just for you. And as he mentioned, yes, we will do nonfiction picks. If you're a nonfiction lover, we love to do that. So please try out that service if you'd like. We do have some upcoming programs that we hope to see you at. First, we have the Lit Lovers Festival. This is an in-person program happening at the Thornhill branch on Friday, April 12th at 6 p.m. It's an after-hours program. There's going to be snacks. There's going to be literary activities and info tables. And then Harry and I, along with the 2 selectors, Jennifer, who does selects all of the adult print material, and Cindy, who selects all of our AV material at the library, we're going to talk about forthcoming books. This is a very fun program. We've done it in person in the before times. We did it in virtual for the pandemic years. Last year we were back in person, and it's in person again this year at the, actually I wrote down Thornhill. It's at the Saks branch this year. I'm really sorry, but I'll have the right link in the follow-up email. It was at Thornhill last year and I copied and pasted this. So yeah, it's at the Saks branch on Friday, April 12th at 6 p.m. And then I brought up Jamaica Kincaid as my first pick, and I said she is the winner of this year's St. Louis Literary Award, and we're having a variety of programs honoring her. And one of the things that we're doing is a book discussion. The African American Experience Book Group, which meets at the Parkview branch as well as virtually. They meet every month, but this coming month in April, they are discussing Lucy by Jamaica Kincaid. So we hope if you haven't read any Jamaica Kincaid and you'd like to try it out and discuss it with some other people, I definitely would suggest that you do. You can pick up a copy of the book at the service desk at the Parkview branch. And yeah, join them either in person at 2 p.m. or virtually at 6:30 p.m. We're also having this like writing experience called Inspired by Jamaica Kincaid. So in honor of this year's St. Louis Literary Award recipient, we want you to share your work with us that you've created based on Jamaica Kincaid's influential and enduring microfiction work, Girl. So we'd like you to submit an original piece of fiction or creative nonfiction or memoir under 500 words for inclusion in our e-media collection. And you can find out more at this link here, and I'll have the link in our follow-up email as well. As I said, this award is being put on by St. Louis University. If you would like to attend the award ceremony for her, it is happening at 7 p.m. on April 25th at the Sheldon Concert Hall, and you can get tickets through MetroTix. She'll also be doing a craft talk on the St. Louis University campus the day after, and you can find out more information about those events that are being hosted by St. Louis University on their website. And again, I'll include this link in the follow-up email. And now I think we'll come to the Q&A. I'm also going to put some links during the Q&A or just a bit after about some of the things I talked about in my picks. But yeah, I'm going to invite I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to invite all of the other presenters to turn their cameras back on. And let's see if we have any questions in the chat. Okay. I see a thank you. I don't see any questions yet. Okay. So yes, one person asked if there is a list of all the books that we shared, and yes, we do have a handout. I did send out that handout by email to everyone who had registered by noonish today. It might have gone to your spam, but I will be sending out a follow-up email that will have the handout attached to it that has all the books that we talked about today with links to the catalog where you can request a copy. I'll be sending that out within the next couple of days once the recording for this program is up on our YouTube channel. If you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. But I think I will first ask Blake, if you have any upcoming author events that you would like to highlight, especially some like nonfiction ones.
Yes, I always have a ton of author events coming up. But April is a little light, but May and June, we really got a ton of authors coming into town. So I wrote it down this time so I can make sure I've got all the dates and everything ready. So in April, historian Hampton Sides will be at the History Museum with his new book, and that'll be April 16th. The doors will open at 5:30. Talk starts at 6:30, which is a little different for us. We usually start at 7. So it's at the History Museum. We're going on location. It's a fantastic time. We did it last year with HW Brands, so I highly recommend. And if you've got any questions or anything that you need like repeated, it'll be on the website for SLCL and the authors tab. And then a couple other ones I want to just briefly mention. Bakari Sellers, who is the former South Carolina State Representative, has a new book, and he will be at the Ethical Society, and that's on May 2nd, and that's at 7 p.m. And then tickets are live right now for the famous and wonderful historian Eric Larson, and he will be at the Two Hill Performing Arts Center, and that's on the UMSL campus, and that will start at 7 p.m. as well. All these authors have books for sale, and there will be signing lines after the talks. So if you're interested in any of those, they're on our website, and they're all fantastic. Come check them out.
Awesome. Thanks, Blake.
You're welcome.
Yeah, those are some big names.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Any other questions? I've started putting a couple of the links that I talked about in my books into the chat. I was having trouble sharing them while I was sharing the slides, so that's why I'm putting them in there now. But let's see. Okay, lots of thank yous. And including some people that said that, yeah, they really enjoyed a few of the books that we talked about. Said, were the recommended books published within the past year? No, not all of them. In fact, some of the books were like several years old. I would say several of mine were published very recently. Like I believe Sleeping with the Ancestors just came out with in the past year. But several of mine are older, and in fact, My Brother by Jamaica Kincaid came out in 1997. So, yeah. Did anyone else have any that were quite new? Harry usually does really new ones. Yeah,
I like the latest and the greatest.
Yeah, a lot of mine, and I think at least two of them were author events that we had hosted last year, that I just loved, and I had to share it with people. Most of mine have been at least 2020 and newer. So.
Blake, you nailed it with the Glatt book. That's the
Oh, I
best of the
know.
Murdaugh books.
I know we both love the true crime.
Let's see. Again, not a lot of, so I'm gonna while we're waiting for any other questions that come in, are any of you presenters reading anything good right now that you'd like to talk about? It doesn't necessarily have to be nonfiction, although, you know, bonus, I guess, if it is.
I just finished Battle for the Bird by Kurt Wagner, which is about Twitter. Jack Dorsey, co-founder of Twitter from St. Louis. We're going to read that book before we get the OpenAI book, because that co-founder is also from St. Louis, Sam Altman. But Battle for the Bird is really good, very entertaining. Dorsey is one strange dude.
Go ahead, sorry.
I'll say good to bring that up on 314 St. Louis Day. So
yeah. I'm currently reading The Frozen River by Ariel Lahan. This one we just hosted her not too long ago, I guess like last week. And this one is actually, it's not nonfiction, but it's a historical fiction based on, I have to remember who it is, Martha Ballard, who is a midwife in the 1700s. So it's really good, especially if you like historical fiction. And I try to navigate towards the ones that aren't World War II, World War I. And this one, if you're like me and want something different, this one fits the bill. So I highly recommend this one.
I'm always reading like 8 things at a time. So I was like, what am I reading right now? Which ones? I did start rereading a couple that are just my favorites, and I probably read them every year or two. The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which is just delightful. It's just my comfort book. And Poems by Mary Oliver, which I actually discovered through patrons placing holds, and then I was like, I gotta put myself on the holds list too. And yeah, she's my favorite. And
for nonfiction, I just finished reading How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis. That's actually one of our presenters talked about in the last book talk program that we did. So I just finished that, and it's really good. It's a good book, even if you aren't suffering from mental health issues. But maybe if you're like a perfectionist, so to like rein yourself in. So yeah, so I really like that book, and I'm also right now in the middle of, almost to the end actually, of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which is really good. I don't know why. I know it was like very hot last year, but it takes me a while to get through all the TBR. So I'm just finishing reading that soon, and I like it quite a bit. So that's what I'm reading right now. Let's see. No other questions? Sorry, there's some comments and I'm reading through them. Just a second.
While you're reading through the comments, I just want to second your recommendation on the how to do housework while drowning. I loved that one too. So that's a second for that one.
So someone was asking about the personalized reading list, especially if you read like a really large variety, and that's totally fine. So on the form, we ask you both about telling us about some authors or books that you have liked recently, as well as like your current mood. But yeah, we don't necessarily have to, stick to a certain topic. And some people, the more information you give us, the more personalized the suggestions get. And also you can use the service over and over and over again. And we do keep track of what we have given you so we don't repeat it, and any feedback that you've given us on the suggestions. So even if you are like, oh, kind of you read all over the place, feel free to use it and use it over and over to get all kinds of different suggestions. Okay, someone asked us if we have any designated areas of expertise that we concentrate on. I will say, all four of us read quite widely, but I do read in my personal life. I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, but I read a lot of nonfiction too. I would say science fiction, fantasy, and like sort of those kinds of books that are about like personal development, edging on like psychology, like that kind of thing. Those are probably the genres that I read in the most. Harry's a big mystery reader. Yeah. And he actually runs a mystery book group. And I know, Blake, you read like everything too.
I do. I had a mystery book group, like Harry, for a while when I was at the branch, but now that I do author events, I really read across the board. So it's a wide variety for me.
Yeah. We have a question for TC at least before we end. Someone wanted to know if you could repeat the titles of the last two books you mentioned. I assume it maybe is the Bruce Lee books.
Yes. So the main book I talked about was Like Water, A Cultural History of Bruce Lee. And if you meant his daughter's book, it's Be Water, My Friend, The Teachings of Bruce Lee by Shannon Lee. And then if you meant my forthcoming book, it's actually hard to read, so I'm going to go to my paper. Wildlife, Finding My Purpose in an Untamed World by Dr. Ray Wynn Grant.
And I did put Be Water, My Friend into the chat. And again, all of our like official picks will be in that handout that'll be attached to the follow-up email. And I would say there's one last question, and maybe if we have time to quickly answer this and around robin, but someone asked about our reading routines and how we find time to read. I would say we have varying reading speeds. So just know that like it's totally normal to like, yeah, we have varying reading speeds. So some people read tons and tons and tons, and some people read less, and that's totally fine. But I will say that one thing I've started doing, I actually just recently got a Kindle, and part of the reason I got it was because it's easier to read in the dark without disturbing my husband in the morning. And I have switched over, like right after my alarm gets up, I switched over from doom scrolling on my phone to reading on my Kindle. So I get at least like 15 minutes of reading on my Kindle in the morning, and then I usually read before bed as well. So that's kind of my reading routine, is morning and night. I don't know what do the rest of you like to do? You read a lot, Blake. How do you fit all of that in?
Yeah. Should I call myself out and say that how many I read last year? So last year I read over 300. You don't have to do that. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. Again, I host a lot of authors, but my main thing is audiobooks. I do audiobooks while I'm driving. I've got a commute to the back where I work with the Edmund building. I've got while you do chores, while you walk the dog, audiobooks are your best friend. I also have a Kindle, like Sarah said, so you can read at night when your partner is sleeping, or if you've got animals, it doesn't really disturb them. You don't have to have a light on. You kind of just, everything's dark. And I also find that I read faster on a Kindle than I do a physical book. So that also helps if you're looking to edge your speed just a little bit.
And just to contrast that, I'll tell you that I, on average, read about 2 books a month. Some months I read more and some months I read less. And I do love reading, but I also have other hobbies that I do, including watching TV and YouTube. So that's what I was talking about, Not Your Mama's History YouTube channel. I watch a lot of like, I don't know, nonfiction YouTube stuff. So Yeah, so just know, like, it's fine. You can be a reader and only read a book a month or something. It's fine.
Normal people read like a book a month. It's fine.
Yeah, we have a few people talking about how they also like listen to audiobooks too. Yeah, I love audiobooks. So, and yes, and I tend to read them at a higher speed. Or someone in the chat says they read them at 1.75 speed, and I do too. I usually read them between 1.5 and 2, depending on the narrator. So
I learned double speed from you, Sarah.
yeah, I will if I'm trying to like get through a book that like I'm really reading for work and not for pleasure, I will read it at over 2 times speed. And I can read it really fast, like up to 3 times speed in my ear if I also have the picture like in front of my eyes, like so I'll do that for things that like I didn't really want to read, but I kind of have to for professional reasons. All right, I think we will kind of end it there. We did have one question that said that they missed the beginning of the presentation, and yes, we are currently recording, and we will have this up on our YouTube channel within 3 business days, so probably by early next week. And when it is ready, I will send out a follow-up email, letting everyone know. So I think we will end it there. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending tonight. Hope you got some really great picks, and I hope that we see you at another event soon, whether that's Lit Lovers or an author event or one of the Jamaica Kincaid events. And I want to give a special thank you to TC and Blake for joining Harry and I tonight, taking time out of your regular duties. So yeah, so I hope everyone has a safe evening, that you've all stayed safe and warm inside during this stormy night. The TC and Harry and Blake will go. I'm going to turn off my camera. I'm going to leave the program running for just a few minutes in case you want to click any of those links that are in the chat. But we will stop recording and we'll see you again in another program. Good night, everyone.